Welcome to Podcast This Escape, the podcast where we talk about the escape room that we escaped from in the previous episode of this podcast. Neil, JB, you did it! You got all 5 photos and you showed up Justin!
Hooray! We did it. We have all kinds of notes to prove it. That was fun.
Hieroglyphics.
Oh,
this was better than Africa.
Perfect.
You didn't have to do rock skipping with hippos on your real African safari?
Not at all. And I didn't have to have a 10-hour flight. This was so much more convenient.
I know. Africa from the comfort of your own living room.
And listen, Justin, for being such a D-bag, he actually sort of saved our lives. Let's be honest. We showed him up with the 5 photos to 4, but he was a decent person. Gave us clues to opening his trunk and, kept us from being eaten by animals. So I kind of like the guy.
That is true. Now, I will say, you were far less ambitious. In the playtest, when he said name your price, I named Justin's entire net worth as my price, and when I won, I got everything. He's destitute in my universe. He has nothing.
Yeah, he should have really, really raised the stakes there.
You sat at 10,000. You're like a fool.
Oh, speaking of bets, we had our own minor bet that you wagered to me. You wagered me $1 million for something to happen in this room that I was worried about.
Oh, yes. Is this about the hippos?
Yeah.
So Danny, when she's put together this picture of hippos and rocks, right? Where some are rocks and some are hippos. And the key, as we find out later, is that the hippos have like a full hemisphere of shadow and the rocks only have like a little quarter of shadow. And Danny has been worried for days that, they're just going to solve it straight away. They're not going to need to find the Polaroid. They're just going to look at that picture of rocks and hippos. They're going to be like, well, maybe the hippos are the ones with a full half circle. And I thought that was the most insane worry that somebody could have. Was there anything in your head that thought, hey, maybe if I look at these hippos and these rocks and look at the ones that have longer shadows, I can avoid those because they're obviously hippos?
I didn't think of it that way. I imagined that there must have been another level to it. That I was imagining we were going to need something like, I was imagining an Indiana Jonesy kind of a handful of dust that you would toss onto them, and the sweat of their skin would be different,
or something that they were afraid of and that would cause them to like run away from, or something like that.
Yeah,
I did consider a dust scattering style thing for that, but in the end, I couldn't draw that. And I wanted to make more purpose for the Polaroids.
That worked great. I loved it.
All right. What were some highlights for you? What did you feel best about yourself with?
I was really proud that I figured out the calming skytop hieroglyphic translation, cipher, whatever we want to call that.
Smart.
That was fun. And then obviously we had to go through the other ones thereafter based on that. Reusing the mosquito net, Neil, that was a great call.
Yeah, that was fun. We needed a little help with how to cut it down from the treehouse, but that was cool. No, I've been listening to the last few episodes of this season, and there have been some very challenging puzzles, some very like multi-leveled letters that use the 3rd letter, and this turns into the 5th letter of that. And I thought, oh no, if that's what we're gonna have to do on this, I'm gonna do a lot of work. So the fact that it was sort of outside of a singular room that we were in with 4 walls, where we were having to sort of go clockwise around the room and examine everything, was super fun. Loved that it took us on a bit of a safari adventure. And
Can you imagine if I just set the entire escape room just in the Jeep? You could get the 5 photos and find Justin just in the conclusion.
Perfect. A pure Jeep room.
Apparently you can hide a lot of stuff inside a Jeep.
Well, we have done an episode inside a car before.
That's true.
Completely contained within a car. So it wouldn't be unheard of.
But yeah, I felt a bit on the fence about starting it. Like, I like starting with, you cannot progress to the rest of the room unless you have solved this one starting puzzle. Often people will make that a nice, easy introductory puzzle. I decided no.
No, you went a bit hard on the GPS.
It's going to end with a pun, so they can't hate me, but it's not going to be easy.
No, like JB, I loved solving the names of the rocks of the different areas to go. That was super.
Yeah, that was Great.
And that to me was really impressive because it was like when you first saw the brochure, I was very excited when JB went, let's make a note. We are in Calming Skytop. That's going to be a puzzle later. It's going to be an anagram. It's going to be something. That's definitely like, look at that. And so that I was so happy when that happened because it was like, oh, great. This is definitely going to lead to him being able to start solving those straight away. And then when we got there, Neil already was like, okay, double letter, ending a 4-letter word. It's not going to be this, not going to be that. That's got to be double E, which means that's probably TR, tree. We're in a place with trees.
We could have given you nothing and you would have been fine.
And you may have been able to do it, right? Like, I remember there was a there was a task on Taskmaster in the UK, which is a fantastic show where they get all the comedians to play games. And there was one where they were given a note that was in complete code and they had to figure out what it was in the same way as a substitution of letters to others. And we did what any good nerdy person would do, and we paused the show when they showed the full note, and we solved the entirety of it on the basis that there was one long word that must be the word Taskmaster. And on that basis, let's try and solve the rest of the note. And in the actual task, there was
they would actually
hints
find
and they gave you like the full code and all this sort of stuff. But it was a similar feeling, and I think that's always a good sign when you straight away think, I reckon I could have a crack at this. I reckon I could get... and so that was like both of you doing the exact right thing, right? Because it required a mix of substituting and figuring out what you might already know, which is where JB came in straight away, mixed with that doesn't give you everything. You have to make some educated decisions about what letters could go in certain places. So I thought you two were very impressive with that, and you did it exactly the way you should do that type of a puzzle.
So was most of the steering wheel puzzle just a red herring?
No, you needed to turn on the Jeep for that, but yeah, you desperately needed to get that E. It was all just about that E. Yeah.
Right, because there were all kinds of different letters and combinations of letters and purples, and I thought that we'd have to come back to that and use all of the letters in sequence in some way.
But no, it was just basically you need to get the correct direction, up, down, left, or right, and the correct color of the 3 secondary colors that were there.
Smart. I went right to Pigpen Cipher. Womp womp.
As well you should have, because that is how Pigpen ciphers work. So I think you need to be in that frame of mind in order to see the steering wheel has the X, which is what Pigpen ciphers need.
Yeah, it was.
It's so interesting doing these things. It's hard for me not to overthink and assume that everything is a smaller piece to a larger meta puzzle. So when I see 3 different things, I think, I'm panicking. My brain's like, I'm gonna need these for future things, and I sort of overcomplicate. Like as I'm writing things down and looking back at my notes now, I'm assuming that Alexandria is going to come back and that her name may be important down the road, and I'm sort of thinking back to the previous puzzles that we did, and I'm just kind of clouding up my own singular narrative. And I do that in escape rooms, I think, as well, as I get sort of overwhelmed by the entirety of it, instead of just sort of calmly looking at what's in front of you and using what few steps you have around you to assist, which I think is helpful. Although, that said, you guys have done some that are really meta and swing back to to a larger puzzle, and you really had to have kept track and notes of everything. So we kind of lucked out, JB, on this one. That we didn't have to solve some giant, larger thing at the end.
You didn't pay attention to the 4th word I said every time you arrived at a new location? What the hell?
I can't believe it. I will say, I think the closest this room, or the thing that this room had that was sort of like the connected meta puzzle idea, was the Polaroids, each one giving you more digits for that original lock. And you two noticed really quickly that there was like placement within those Polaroids of numbers.
That was
one at the
good.
top, one at the bottom.
That was one of the things that changed from the playtest. It was slightly more weird than that, and it was actually like about what body parts you could see in the picture.
The original was a little bit more obtuse,
as opposed to just their placement.
Where I think, like the 4 numbers represented like heads, bodies, and then each leg or something, and then you had to count how many times his legs appeared and how many times his head appeared and how many times. And that didn't quite work. It wasn't as. And I think, like you, on one of those, it had the full hand like this. with all 5 fingers out, and I immediately went, "Hey, that's 5 fingers. I bet you that's the number 5."
Yeah, and I love
and-
that you added together to save us from being able to go and hack it at the end.
Yeah,
right?
that
You
was
needed the 4th one with the addition of the 2 additional
Mm.
fingers.
Had to be there.
Smart.
This was the thing that I remember discussing with Tommy Honton about coming up with codes, making sure that when you give someone a code, like if there's a 4-digit code, you can't just give them numbers 1, 2, and 3 and then expect them to sit around and find number 4.
Because number 4, it
at
takes
that
10
point,
seconds.
it feels like a waste of time to go searching for it, even if you want the satisfaction of solving every puzzle. It makes you feel a bit silly. So you do something to make sure that they need that last one.
Which actually did happen to us when we did an escape room with Tommy.
That's true.
And I was off looking for clue number 4, and he was like, "I opened it already. What are you talking
we had
about?
the first 3.
If you get 3 digits, you open the lock and you move on." And I was like, "No, Tommy, please."
I've done the same thing as Tommy.
I've done it as well. I'm pretty sure I've done
fact-
one room where you had to do that because the 4th digit was nowhere in the room.
True.
In fact, that's
So-
one of my superpowers in escape rooms, and I'm not proud of it, I guess, but JB's been witness to it, is that I'm the guy with the numeric keys, or like the letter keys. Like if we can get 3 or 4 letters, I can figure out what word will fit into that by like seeing what are available letters on the spindle and then being able to sort of hack it. And I feel kind of bad that I'm not following through by solving the full sequence. And yet in an escape room, when you're working at time, I'm not going to bring wire cutters or something and like cut the locks. But if I'm able to get 3 or 4, then I can sit there and go like bang, 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 and unlock it with relative ease. Is that cheating?
I mean, it depends on your philosophy, because to a lot of people, no. And
know.
apparently sometimes people rely on it, right? In Danny's case. So it's just important that if you don't want that to happen, you need to take steps to avoid it. And I think for us, giving you a false digit, so you would always get it wrong, and then needing to change that digit later is a good way to avoid it.
You give people numbers, and then there's a secret clue hidden somewhere that says, "Oh, by the way, you've got to double everything."
Yeah, things like that, right? You add
7.
the addendums.
Oh,
the
that's
final
a very
clue
smart
says
thing to say.
those are the numbers, but they're actually in a separate order than we gave them to you. You're like, you got me. And it's things like that. They exist mostly just to stop brute forcing of codes.
That's
the other
very
thing
smart.
and the other, we take advantage of the audio medium a lot to just say, "Hey, you're in real danger. So if you make an attempt and it's not correct, you'll die. Or you get stabbed by a big knife." You're like, "Okay, cool. Well, now so then you forced me to play the game, right? There's only 10 combos. Yeah, but if you get it wrong, cyanide. Oh, better not do it." So like, that's a tool that we can use as well.
Yeah, like being
love it,
charged
though.
by
I
a
don't-
buffalo. You have 3 options: up, left, or
exactly.
right. Which
Oh, that
one do
was
you
fun.
choose? You can't choose all of them.
You can't try one after the other. You can't save your game, try left, reload, and go right. You got to make an informed decision.
I like that. I think some people might figure that's the game designer giving an FU to the players of like, haha, you thought you could solve it, but now you can really solve it. But I think it more to avoid me actually just trying to go quickly through it, right? Like I ascribe to the idea that one shouldn't be the fastest one out of an escape room. I don't understand the logic of it. We've talked about it before, because I just find that it goes against the construct of the room. And yet here I am saying that sometimes I'm like panicking and trying to solve as much as I can. So having those kind of clues, I think, is really helpful. Actually, JB, it will be good in box 2, something like that, where you think it seems obvious, you think you're close to solving something, and you really need that last clue to adjust all of the numbers up 1 or half of what it was, so that you can't do that. It's a good call.
Did you, Danny, have anything that has gone differently than how you expected it would in writing it? People's attitudes to characters, the sequencing, like, has everything gone fairly smoothly from your design?
I think that it was just tight enough that it worked well. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think both of you, as your first step, went to the waterhole, which I absolutely hoped would be the case. There was nothing forcing that. You would have been blocked off by something no matter which way, but that's the one that blocks you off and tells you about the stabby bushes. And I wanted that to get in there earlier than the other stuff. No particular reason. It's just a pleasant surprise. But no, I don't think the order, it feels like it's a lot more free than it is. It's pretty railroaded.
It is quite linear.
Yeah.
That you can't do the water hole, you can't do the cliffside, you can only do the tree thicket, but you need to have gone to the water hole first. Like there's not a huge amount of openness.
I needed to keep it quite strict, especially when doing things like gathering 4 Polaroids, some of which have immediately helpful clues on them. I needed to make sure they ended up in the right places and only came in at the right times. And that was very hard. My notes for this room are scattered. There were originally 5 Polaroids as well, and I just cut one. It just wasn't working, didn't make any sense. And then I forgot, I had 5 locations for Polaroids and I kept forgetting which one I'd cut.
The structure of this room could also be expanded to have 2 separate people that have to use their walkie-talkies in different locations to give each other information.
Yeah, potentially.
That was fun.
And there's things like that which work well for games that can work less well for podcasts.
Yeah,
I think like the classic thing for us, right, is splitting people up to do 2 things at once is great when you're running like a game on Zoom.
So
right,
that they can actually be playing them.
Because someone can be sitting in the corner doing notes while the other person's playing and you can jump back and forth. But when you're trying to deal with like a listener experience, it makes much more sense to kind of force you guys to be one person. But it is true, right? Like when you're making the games for other contexts, those are the sorts of things you can play with. You can split parties and do this, and you can even get people on like separate Zoom calls and be like, now you use your walkie-talkie, we'll put you back in the same room and you can actually talk to each other. And now the walkie-talkies have run out of battery. Sorry, you're back in separate rooms.
Yeah, there's amazing potential for this sort of online stuff.
And I think it's the sort of thing we discussed earlier where like the best experiences are the ones that are designed explicitly for their own medium, right? Like you can tell when you do an escape room that's online, whether it was an escape room designed to be an online escape room or whether it's an online version of someone's real escape room.
No, that's I was getting at earlier when we were talking about our magic show and things like that. That it was, if people were trying to do a Broadway show and just happened to broadcast it online, or trying to do a magic show that was meant to be done in person and it happens to be it is always inferior because the original medium, as you're saying, was always superior to an alternate thing. And likewise here, I think the same is true.
Fun listening experience. We did one, what was that we did recently, JB? We you guys might know what they're called, but it's a 2-person sort of escapey puzzly thing where you're both
so good.
You're both looking at a desktop that has sort of weird things.
You were seeing something that I couldn't see, and I was seeing something that you couldn't see, and we were having to collaborate and communicate.
Describe. So I'm looking at a 4. It looks like a dial, and it looks like it can go for. There's like 6 numbers on it. Do you have anything that has 6 numbers? And goes, oh, I can see down here. I have like 4 numbers are crossed out. And I'm like, enter the other number. And it was. I don't know what it's called. It was like cooperative play. And
have you done? There's an online escape room that's just like that, made by the 2 Set Violin guys.
Yes, there are a couple of Australian classical music YouTubers who made an escape room based on that, where it's each person has their own.
You're in
screen.
2 separate dressing rooms, basically, and you can talk through the wall to each other about what you can see. And each of you has answers to each other's puzzles.
And those types
it's
of
nice,
experiences,
it's quick, it's free. Please do it. They're great.
It's definitely a great thing to do for anybody listening as well. But those types of experiences are great. It's like trying to play Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, where you have a bomb and one person trying to disarm it. It's a fun thing. And we've done puzzles like that in real escape rooms as well, where they'll put 2 things around the corner and say, you describe what's in here, and that will... and like it opens up those ways to play with language puzzles and play with the idea of communication. Like, do you have 4 numbers? Yeah, I've got 4 numbers because they've got a big sign that says 4 numbers, but they should be looking for 4 separate numbers, and that and all these weird things where you're trying to add confusion that can later be clarified.
Got great room for puns in those sorts of ones.
It's a lot of fun stuff to play
They're
with.
Fantastic. I think I've said a lot that those are some of my favorite escape room puzzles that exist. Ones where that has to happen. Just things that are forced teamwork.
Let me ask you guys a question. And I'm saying this not for lip service, because we're still in sort of design, figuring things out phase on box 2.
Hmm.
Do you find that there's a finite number of types of games and puzzles? Do most of these fit into a dirty dozen or 20 or 10 different types of, like what we did just now was probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 different types of puzzle experiences, but I know that there's many
interesting.
more.
I would think there probably is like a set of archetypical puzzles, proto puzzles, the
Right.
puzzles that
It's
everything is a variation
like
of.
the hero's journey. No one is working off those puzzles and saying, today I'm going to use one of these ones. But if you look at them as a whole, you'll probably be able to find categories and limit
you don't do
them.
that. You don't think, well, but the last one I did was more of a numerical thing, so instead I'm going to do more of a.
I do notice, like I will say, if I've already got numbers, I don't want to add too many more numbers because that'll confuse things. But so I suppose to an extent, but I not super deliberately from the outset.
Yeah, I'm sure there are probably some puzzle theorists who could operate from that.
Could be.
That well, right? This is because it is true that when you're doing puzzles, you have those different mechanisms of how to solve a puzzle. Like one of the example, the hippo one here is you have something that needs to be disambiguated, and and somewhere else there is a key for disambiguation. There's no real puzzle there, right? It's just you have a single set or image or ideal that once you know the key, that is the solution, right? And we find out which are hippos, which are not. Now I can do it,
and that's such a hugely broad category that an awful lot of things could fit under that umbrella.
Right, but there are some, there's the ones where you have all the rules and you have to figure out, on Tuesday, Jen
the
logic
takes
the third chair.
Ones.
On Wednesday, Susanna sits next to the person on the first chair, and that's probably its own type of game.
Yeah, I would say so. And you can see that same type of game applied in different contexts as well. I'm sure we have done puzzles before that were like visual versions that still followed the rules of what needs to be like logic puzzles are classically that story of this person has blonde hair but the person with green hair is not sitting next to the person with but you can also, we've done versions of that which were just like turn this switch up. Then for another switch, the new rule is if any switches are up, this switch is down. And then the next one is like, so that's the same puzzle in a different implementation.
And sometimes the puzzle is less the solving of the puzzle and more the realizing what type of puzzle you've got.
Yes, you can think like,
which is like
this
maths.
is just...
That's what maths class is all about. If you have a maths exam, it's often not, all right, do I remember how to apply the sine rule? It's realizing, this is a sine rule question.
I think that is probably true for puzzles as well.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a limited number of categories. You probably could find a way to make categories such that it encapsulates every possible puzzle. But I'm still going to escape rooms and being surprised by things.
I would wager there's someone listening now who's going to send us an email saying, I've made a podcast episode exactly about
every
this.
type of puzzle.
So
because in Magic they say there's 7 different types of magic tricks, and everything essentially falls into levitation, escape,
right, like making something appear, making something disappear, those sorts
making
of
something
things.
reappear. Jonathan knows more about them. But I wonder, like, when you're designing this room, what is the impetus for it? Do you feel like we haven't done one in this location, and from the location it goes forward, or do you think we've done a lot of brainy word things recently, and I want to do one that's a different vibe?
Puzzles come absolute last to me. For these standalone rooms, it is absolutely location first, and then story, and puzzles dead last. For the connected ones, it's story first, and then locations. And
that's so interesting,
puzzles
because if
are absolutely dead last.
But if you're plugging in puzzles last, do you have a notebook filled with all the? You must have a notebook filled with all the variations of puzzles, or do you just love puzzles so much that you just kind of innately come up with different ideas?
I feel like I'm just more coming up with them week by week rather than
that's awesome.
Taking inspiration. We do have some puzzle books lying around, but I don't feel like I read them as research so that I can put them away in the arsenal for later.
Unless you're asking our accountant, in which case, yes, we do read them for research. That's why we're writing them off.
I love it.
It's a business expense.
Yeah, it tends to be more, I don't usually even think, I very rarely even try to put just a puzzle in a spot. If it gets to that stage, I do my notes. I say, here are all the things that are going to be in this room. Here's how they might connect to each other. Like, I feel like we should be stuck in the Jeep. And then I feel like you need something from the water hole to be able to progress to the tree thicket. And then think about logically what makes sense there. And then sometimes just saying, okay, this thing I want to block completely off. Like, I do not want you to be able to get climbing gear, full stop. There is just going to be a puzzle blocking that. And I'll just write puzzle there. And then at the very end, I will say, all right, what could we get here? Letters, numbers, colors. What do we got? And just, fit it in at the end there.
I'm still, for as much as I know you guys and listen to your show and do tabletop escape things and like the curious correspondence thing that I mentioned in the last episode, I'm just still so impressed with the logic of doing it. And I don't know, it's not a superpower that I possess so much. I love knowing how things work, and I love solving them, but sitting down and trying to design them, maybe because of what I said earlier, I kind of feel like I get in my own way. I'm trying to be overly logical about it, and to this many numeric things and this many spatial things and this many visual things.
There are loads of writers that you hear who go in and say, I want to be writing this book, but it feels too big for me. I just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that can be the same way. They just get ideas blasting at them from every direction, and they don't have
I think it's what keeps me loving these being what you guys do, right? But also just what everyone here listening likes because of them. I like the new ones. I like to see who's come up with that and think, well, that's just so smart. What a cool thing to have figured out.
I love doing all of the escape rooms and other things of people who have the talents in areas that I don't, like the people who do start with puzzles and branch out from a puzzle and make an entire room and an entire story from that. I don't know how to work that way. I don't feel like a puzzle person. I just feel like a story person. So the idea of doing that is amazing to me. And I love experiencing that. Like I always say, it's a weird thing because I always say, I don't feel like a puzzle person. I am a story writing person. This is just the medium for me. However, why do I do escape rooms? Oh, it's for the puzzles. It's not that much for the story. I love story, but I do escape rooms for puzzles.
At the end of the day. But I also feel like the electromagnet that keeps the secret door closed, like I find the mechanics of that its own puzzle.
Oh, that's where my mind just explodes.
People who are able to figure that out.
Don't understand any of it.
You're going to be given a talisman, and when the talisman is placed in a specific place, the magnet gets the electric current to turn on the thing that causes the thing to switch off. I love that. I don't know how it works.
I also do love that. That's sort of like
that's so impressive.
It's one of those things though with escape rooms where you can tell the people behind them, because either there's like the one designer who's like, when they take this thing, there's an RFID chip and it reads this, and then it sends a signal to here, and that opens this, and then that, and then you go to another place and the guy says, yeah, when you do that, the guy watching sees it and he presses a button and it opens the door. He sees that you put the thing down. He just opens the door. He just like opens it with his hand.
You can tell the backgrounds of the people. How many engineers were in your group of designers?
It's always very funny.
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm not with no spoilers at all. This conversation is exactly similar to magical conversations and the ideology of it, because what's so exciting about magical secrets, without giving away any, is that they absolutely run the gamut. And is that you can see a stage illusionist do a trick where he makes 5 people disappear and reappear, and sometimes it is a very impressive technological feat that involves like perfect timing and a multitude of things that are happening, and other times it's incredibly basic. Like,
is this not like the entire
piece of fabric that's not well lit? And
it's like the entire model of The Prestige.
Yeah, a little bit, right? The Prestige was a great example of that. But even, Jonathan, you can speak to this a little bit, but a card trick can be super simplistic or super technological now. You can actually do things with with
Where did that card come
dice-
from?
with dice. I mean, dice can be loaded with a little weight on one end of it that'll allow it to always roll on the same number. But nowadays, dice can also like have technology within the die that can speak to someone that's not even in the room. I
There's
mean, it's
lots
really
of magical
ridiculous.
things.
it's really kind of amazing.
Yeah, magic works both ways. There's sometimes it's the absolute stupidest method that everyone would immediately dismiss and say there's no way that there would actually be that. That's ridiculous. That's so stupid. Everyone figure that, and that's actually what we do. And other times it's the opposite side of the spectrum where it's the most ridiculous, complicated method that you would think, oh, there's no way they would go through all that effort, all that expense.
Right.
There's that quote, the teller, I believe, that's, magic is oftentimes spending an unreasonable amount of time preparing for something that is seemingly impromptu. So magicians will go out of their way to a comical degree to prepare something. I'll show up at the restaurant 6 hours early and plant, a card in a wine bottle, just knowing that there might be a chance. So similar, theories of willing to go through the work to create, the narrative of the story or the adventure later.
And yet escape rooms and that kind of puzzle ideology is not dissimilar, because you're not sure where someone's going to go, if they're going to go to the cliff or if they're going to go to the water. And you're spending sort of an undue amount of time in preparation for sort of a singular outcome.
Still making sure that you have the control over that randomness.
There's a great magic act, which you might have seen. People do it now, and they've done it for hundreds of years. It's a 2-person telekinesis act where usually the assistant is on stage, blindfolded in some way or ears covered or however, and then the magician is usually out in the audience holding up things. I'm holding something in my hand, and the assistant,
the clairvoyance is what you're speaking of.
Clairvoyance, and they're able to describe what it is. And most people know simple ways that can be accomplished. There's easy codes that can be transferred through basic talking techniques. That's like a party game. But the best acts do 7 or 8 different methods sort of simultaneously. So just when you think you've figured something out, then they do something totally different.
And you can have methods that cancel out other methods. So, that wouldn't have worked. And you look at a magic trick and you think that there's one simple solution, and often, or at least the best magic tricks, there's not. There's 3 separate solutions, and you as a spectator think that there's one, and there's the fallacy. That's why you can't.
I think that's
that's a perfect
figure out
idea. Yeah, as soon as you think like, I've got my theory, but one thing has disproven my theory, so therefore it can't be true ever.
Correct.
Like, that must all be wrong. It's a really fun. It's like just playing on that human way of thinking, trying to find the pattern, and that is the pattern. Well, we could probably talk about magic and puzzles forever, but it is late.
I want to ask just the one thing: is it enjoyable knowing magic and watching Fool Us? Is it fun?
Fool Us is great. Yeah, I mean, magicians love being fooled. I think good magicians, love being fooled, and I'm still fooled all the time. And it makes me appreciate the sensation of being fooled. I'm willing to admit when I'm fooled. I like when some magicians are very uptight and like they feel like it's a challenge to their magical supremacy if they don't know how something is done. But I mean, there's things that will continue to absolutely fool David Copperfield on a weekly basis. There are things that fool David Blaine on a weekly basis. It's not impossible. Magicians are well studied, and they will know the majority of common concepts, but that doesn't mean that no one's not going to invent a new magic principle that no one's ever seen before.
And one of the great things about Fool Us is that Penn and Teller are such lovely guys, and they're really good at being kind to a magician when they weren't fooled. They're good at using keywords that show that they know what happened without making them feel embarrassed or anything. So there's a great deal of respect for a show that could have just been, I saw how you did that.
Yeah,
nice one.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and playing through the room. You guys did great. It was very lovely to watch you work. So thank you again, JB. Thank you again, Neil. JB, if people want to find you and what you're doing, where should they look?
Look up Theory 11 on Instagram. You'll see a lot of our work, or theory11.com, THEORY11, like the number.com. And you can see all of our crazy playing cards. And of course, if you haven't played Box One, any listeners of this, you can go to box1game.com and you can get it online. We ship anywhere in the world. If you're in the US, it's in Target stores as of this week. It's also in Walmart stores. We haven't announced that yet. That's an exclusive on Escape This Podcast. We're announcing that soon. But otherwise, anywhere in the world, people can get it at box1game.com.
Please
Wonderful.
do. It is well worth it. You'll be very happy to have played something, not just by people who are like good at the game design that they've done, but you can tell that it's just got a love for the genre. It's got happiness behind it.
That's
That it
wonderful.
does.
And Neil, anything fun and new that people should go and check out on your end?
Yes, I'm in the new Nick Cage movie called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent that comes out sometime soonish. I'm not sure. There's probably a date.
Yes. Google it.
And Matrix 4 was a big flop, apparently, because it came out during the coronavirus. So if you have not seen that, check that out. I'm in a Netflix series called Uncoupled that will be coming out at the end of July. And I've always got stuff going on. I have a great missive newsletter called Wondercade.
Oh,
that
yeah.
If you're not subscribed to, go to wondercade.com. It's very simple. Every Wednesday was Wondercade Wednesday. I'll send you a thing that talks about cool stuff that I think is interesting. The last one that just came out a couple weeks ago was our spring entertainment guide. Just no agenda, just things that I think are good in food. I'll teach you how to make a Negroni. A cool place to go visit. Cool podcasts to listen to, just like this one.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Danny, for running the room. Thank you, everybody, for listening at home. If you want to support us, you can sign up for our Patreon. There's bonus episodes. You can hear the playtest audio. You can hear us trying to solve 2-minute mysteries and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. There are badges. You can appear as an NPC in a room.
Thank you, Alexandria and Justin. Sorry, Justin.
Sorry, Justin. At least you weren't a horse this time. Everyone else seems to always be a horse. All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.